Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it. Not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences. Such as,
I would avoid skiing, I would avoid going outside, and photography and making videos all led me hiding in my room, because I very literally did hide in my room for a year after I moved. I moved into this new environment, and that set my tics into a craziness, and I hid for a year in my room, and then I started the 7 days of Tourette's, and it changed my life. So I just want to say that.
This is Tourette's podcast, made possible with support of the Tourette Association of America and part of the Geeks Rising Network. Hey, it's Ben. Busy times right now for Tourette's podcast. As I speak, I'm a few days in the past. I had to produce this episode a little bit early so I could attend something coming up. So if there's any world event or, something big in the TS community that happened, it might not have happened yet from my point in time, if that makes sense. So I'll just go ahead and say, as I mentioned last week, I'll be in Los Angeles, California on Wednesday, October 30th for a special screening of Motherless Brooklyn, the new Ed Norton film. He's playing a character with TS, and Norton will be at this screening of the film. He's personally introducing it, so yeah, I gotta get out there for that. And last I heard, this is information current as of me speaking right now, which would have been Monday, October 28th. But last I heard, you can attend this. There was still some opportunity. You can go to tourette.org/links, TOURETTE.org/LINKS, and click the button that says Motherless Brooklyn Screening, and you can get the details. After the fact, I'll be bringing back my thoughts about the movie and what happened in Los Angeles. The Tourette Association of America, the primary sponsor of this podcast, is making all this possible. It's just really cool to have their support to arrange things like this. And of course, we love the individual support you give in so many different ways. Word of mouth is still the number one way people are learning about the podcast, amazingly. And it's because of this network that we've all kind of built together. One thing people say in the emails to the podcast is, I was listening to your guest and he or she or they said something that tracked so closely to my own life in such an unlikely way that it seems impossibly remarkable, like I'm listening to my own life story being told by somebody else. Like you just click in strange ways with a guest. And this week, it's definitely happening to me in particular. And I have a feeling it'll deliver the same way for a lot of you because, and what I'm about to say here, even if you have no interest in it, I think it could create interest in it. And I'm talking about the intersection of Tourette Syndrome and photography. There are a lot of Touretters who are pretty well accomplished with photography. I keep meeting professional photographers and art photographers and hobbyists, enthusiasts who have Tourette Syndrome. And so many of them have led off by saying the act of photography just does something to their brains. It changes the meaning of the environment around them, how they interact with it, how safe they feel in it. Please stick with us as we dissect that, because I think there's a lot of interesting and even maybe scientific extended discussion we can have with that. I don't know, maybe. Our guest is Mr. Move and Speak. That's how you might know him on social media. His name is Marco, and he's one of my favorite advocates for Tourette Syndrome. You know the social media hashtag 7 Days of Tourettes. It's a hashtag that Touretters use to just kind of document their walk through the week, like living real life with Tourette Syndrome. Hashtag 7 Days of Tourettes. Well, Marco started that. So it's of course appropriate that he walk us through his life in long form on Tourette's podcast. We talk about cultural influences. We talk about the priceless importance of expression and art for so many people like us. I mean, for everybody, but you know what I mean. We also talk about stuttering, which Marco experiences sometimes, and I have to confess, I was not read up on stuttering, like from a scientific point of view. And I have to fully admit that when he and I talk, because I guess I just start going into my ignorance of how that all works. And we just talk about it for a few minutes, but what I did after the episode is I went to stutteringhelp.org, that's the website of the Stuttering Foundation, and found a PDF called Stuttering and Tourette Syndrome. And it kind of sort of floats the question of a link between TS and stuttering, which doesn't look like there is much of a direct tie between the two, TS and stuttering, according to this brochure. But apparently they do co-occur a lot. One thing here says, quote, many children with TS have frequent disfluencies in their speech. Sometimes their vocal tics resemble speech behaviors often seen in stuttering, end quote. I've always referred to something that I do as stuttering, which I think is just a mislabeling. I kind of do what some people might call stuttering sometimes because I have the tendency to talk a million miles an hour sometimes. When I want to get my sentence out before I'm interrupted or something distracts me from the point, like I do that a lot, and I'll trip over myself in the nervousness of that. Well, that's not stuttering. According to another brochure I found here called Myths About Stuttering, it says nervousness doesn't cause it. It actually says here that nobody knows the exact causes, but it may be genetic or neuromuscular development or the child's environment, including family dynamics. Stress isn't a cause either, but it can make it worse, it says right here. So anyway, I just felt I had to learn something about it, so pardon any ignorance on my part during this conversation ahead where we spend just a few minutes talking about it. I just never want to be the source of bad information, and I always welcome corrections or clarifications from you. It doesn't hurt my feelings if you tell me I'm wrong about something. The whole point is to be helpful. So we talk photography for a little bit near the beginning, but we really get into it later in the episode. And it's such a great talk about it from a therapeutic standpoint and sort of reframing the environment around you. And we even get into the ethics of photography in this context, which can be filled with debate. This is one where I definitely want to hear some feedback from you. Okay, here we go. Here's me and Marco, also known as Mr. Move and Speak.
Well, number one, my name is Marco. I don't know if I should give my last name or not since I haven't really put it on my bio, but
yeah, up to you.
Yeah. Let me just keep it Marco for now. My Instagram is Mr. Move and Speak. And part of the reason that, by the way, I'm not giving my first name is that I feel like I'm still creating an internet presence for myself. Like I just began talking about Tourette Syndrome this year. Like there are members of my family that do not know that I have Tourette's. Like, wow, yeah. Okay. So I'm just kind of getting used to that. But I live in New York City. I'm in Queens, and you can imagine that in Queens, well, not so much. All right, so New York City is densely populated, right? And given the comorbidities of Tourette syndrome, like the social anxiety, the panic disorder, I mean, the Tourette's iceberg. If anybody with Tourette syndrome hasn't Googled that, your mind is going to be blown because people just think Tourette syndrome is just tics, but it's a whole bunch of things. So back to the original topic, living in New York City can be extremely stressful, like extremely stressful. Like just to give you some examples, I love coffee, which is like horrible because I have Tourette's.
Me too. Yeah.
So I had to take the train during rush hour, and I just had a cup of coffee, and I hadn't had coffee all week long. And I literally felt like on that crowded train, I was crawling out of my skin, and I'm back into the train like a sardine, like a sardine in a can. And I'm ticking, and I'm stressed out, and it was just a horrible moment for me. So. Man,
yeah, I totally agree with. So I'm a coffee junkie, and it's probably the worst thing I could be taking, being someone who is Tourettic, and I mean I have pretty uncontainable energy sometimes, and coffee is if I'm addicted to anything, I feel like it's going to be caffeine. If too much time goes into the day without me having a cup of coffee. I mean, it's the generic thing everybody says, like I got to have my cup of coffee to get started, but it has this sort of essential feeling to me in terms of just kind of getting to my prime point in the day. But the fallout is that, I'm jittery. My legs are kicking left and right, when I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm kind of like bobbing, and I'm just, there's no really slowing me down, and my brain's going, I'm getting my work done, but I feel like I look like Tasmanian devil or something in the process. And yeah, I mean, how do you kind of navigate the situations where you feel like you have sort of more energy than you're comfortable with in a situation?
Well, okay. So number one, that's a great question. Right now, I don't spend a lot of time around people. Like I'm basically studying right now. I'm working a lot from home, so I'm not really around a lot of people. My time with people is really with family and public transportation.
Okay.
But when I was around people, like when I was working as a real estate agent, it was very hard. Like I remember, so my tics right now, it's really like myoclonic neck jerks. Like I have these like lightning fast neck jerks, and they're very debilitating. Like they wanted to leave my house. And I just remember as a real estate agent, in 2016, I would always want to sit in the back of the room. Like there are these like little social tricks that I use, like not sitting in front of the room so nobody could be behind me seeing my neck jerk, but I just remember trying to position my self in a room so like nobody would see me, like just basically trying to hide but in open space. It's very odd, but I'm sure that you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean. And this is something, I mean, perfect segue to what I know you and I can talk about pretty comprehensively, and that's photography and street photography, and having something that is almost like it just kind of pulls you through and gives you a sense of purpose. And so I guess to set it up for anybody listening, because you and I have already kind of talked about this a little bit, that you're into photography, I'm into photography. I love street photography. I love getting out in sort of like the urban environment, or just kind of out in the developed environment where people are. I wouldn't ordinarily want to do that. I'm not the kind of person who likes crowded spaces. I really don't like crowded spaces. I don't like grocery stores. It's a little overwhelming to me. And that feeling of kind of always being monitored, or, it's a very nerving kind of thing, or
Yes.
you wonder if people are noticing you, that kind of thing. And having that camera and sort of having a sense of purpose in an urban environment and looking for things to connect with, and even having the opportunity to see a person who looks interesting to you when you ask them, like, hey, I really like your glasses. Would you mind if I took a photograph of you? That kind of like, that's the kind of thing I would never, ever, ever do with anything other than a camera. And it's, I can't fully explain it, but it's just, it gives me some public courage, I guess.
Yeah, it's okay. So a couple things there. So the camera is like a conversation piece in a weird way. I keep on saying it's like a shield because so I feel like you just mentioned, like we feel monitored when we're out in society, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like a camera is almost turning an eye back on the society, kind of like a mirror, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I really think that the monitoring that we feel is our internal eye projected onto other people. So like we're monitoring our ticks, but we're projecting that onto other people, if that makes any sense at all.
Right.
That's what I realize. And I'm sure you've had those moments too, moments of clarity where it's like you're not really, I'm not, okay, so in the majority of times I'm projecting my fears onto other people. Like I don't think that most people notice my ticks as much as I do.
Yeah. It's such a good point, because I put on Instagram the other day, I took a picture of my Tourette Syndrome card, that kind of the explainer card. If there's ever a situation where, if I'm flying in the airport or someone says like, this guy's acting strange, you need to check on him. Yeah. I can hand him my card that the Tourette Association prints, and it explains what Tourette Syndrome is in a very clear, concise way. And hopefully that should, kind of diffuse any tension. But I put that up there, and so my best friend ever, we've been really close for 25 years. And he said, like, I've known you forever and I don't notice your ticks. And it's the sort of normalcy of me to him is not necessarily how I view myself. And I definitely have that sense of paranoia that I don't belong in that environment. And what you were saying about the camera kind of like turning the eye on them, it makes a lot of sense. It kind of gives you a sense of authority in a way, if that makes sense, I guess.
It really does. Like it's almost like leveling the playing field for me. I feel like I'm kind of not. I don't want to. I have a tendency to overgeneralize, and I also stutter sometimes too when I get excited. Like I don't know if that's one of the comorbidities. But I just want to get that out of the way too. I have these speech blocks at the most awkward points, but.
Can we talk about that for a second too? Because I've been wanting to kind of talk about that sort of thing. Because when I get really excited, I do okay on the podcast because I think I just kind of feel a sense of comfort talking with other people who have Tourette syndrome.
Yeah.
But in general, when I get really excited, I think my brain thinks way ahead in terms of, it's almost like my brain is at the end of the sentence when I start talking. And I'm still trying to figure out my choice of words to say what I want to say so I can be understood really clearly. But in doing so, I'm really tripping over myself and kind of like, it's almost like I'm kind of like searching in different parts of my brain, like distracted driving to figure out like the best way to say what I'm trying to say. And then I just end up crashing while I'm trying to do it. And which may not be stuttering at all. I mean, that could be a totally different thing, and I sound totally ignorant right now. But
I'm just thinking, like, historically, like, so very little of my symptoms are new. Like, I don't really have, like, I have blocked. So, like, what I'm describing is a form of stuttering called a speech block, there's a cessation of speech. So like, I don't know if you know what a Valsalva maneuver is. You know?
No. Tell me about that.
Okay, I'm going to try to describe it. It's basically if you've ever picked up something heavy and you kind of like tighten your diaphragm. You know, it's like when you're you tighten your chest, so you make your chest rigid, so you can pick up something heavy.
Yeah.
You know, like it looks like you're holding your breath when you're picking up something heavy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to describe it, but basically, a speech block is when I unconsciously do a Valsalva maneuver and I can't get the words out of my mouth. So it's like there's glue on my lips and I just can't get the words out. It's really annoying. I remember as a kid, I would block so bad sometimes that I would just act like I forget what I was trying to say. But of course, I knew I could speak eloquently. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I just couldn't get the words out, right?
Yeah, that's I'm so much. So writing has always been a thing with me, and it's the kind where I don't really know what turned me on to writing. I've just always liked it. I've always liked the expression of writing, and I think it's kind of like that. I have that sense of authority and control, and I'm going at my own pace. And it's not a nervous situation where people are waiting for me to finish my sentence and come across clearly. There's that sense of pressure in that, and that really trips me up. Writing has always been a huge comforting thing to me because I feel like I can be eloquent and say things exactly the way I want it, often in a quicker way sometimes. Just writing it out, things just kind of come out more fluidly and fluently, and I don't really know what that is, and I haven't really inspected that much, but thinking about the sort of pressure of communication sometimes, I feel like that has something to do with it.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought of a great analogy to kind of give everybody listening idea of what goes on when I'm speaking. So there are different speaking scenarios for me. You know, we all know it's not the same thing speaking to yourself in a room versus, let's say, ordering something at a restaurant, right? Like those are different scenarios, right?
Yeah.
Now, there's all this weird pressure that I feel whenever I'm ordering food at a restaurant, or oh my god, phone calls. Don't even get me started on phone calls. Like we should dedicate a couple minutes to that because that's my hardest situation.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So the analogy I wanted to lay down is, you know, speech for me, it's like walking a tightrope, right?
Yeah.
Where, you know, when you're walking a tightrope, they always say don't look down, otherwise you'll fall.
Yeah.
I really feel like whenever I'm speaking, especially in those scenarios that are very stressful for me, it's like walking a tightrope. And when I block, it's like I'm looking down and I'm like, oh my God, I'm speaking in public. And I started having an internal freak out and then I block. So it's like these speech blocks are almost like self-fulfilling prophecies in a weird way that I can't control. I just want to add
that's a really great way to say it because I feel like that too, especially if I'm talking with someone who maybe has stature of some kind or someone who maybe just kind of like has someone, you know, who may intimidate me, and I'm a little guy, and you know, I might just have social nerves anyway, but yeah, sometimes I go into it thinking I'm going to sound just completely off and I'm not going to be, you know, I'm going to walk away and he's going to be wondering what the heck I was talking about or what I was on. Like those are always the things that I'm nervous about when it comes to talking to people.
While we're on this topic, I don't know. I mean, I'll just say this. Like, I have a family history of these things where my mother, I mean, she hasn't been diagnosed, but she definitely stutters. Like, I could see it when she's speaking. And like, I have a family history of Tourette, of tics. I shouldn't say Tourette's, but tics these things run in my family. I don't know about you, but
yeah. I haven't spotted. I've seen other things, maybe kind of like what you're saying. I've seen other things in my family that maybe aren't exactly Tourette syndrome, but they make sense in context with me having Tourette syndrome.
I know what you mean. Like, you know, it's one of those things where I don't know if it's just the fact that both my parents are immigrants. Like my dad is from Italy and my mom is from Jamaica, and I have Tourette's. So it's like only in New York City will you meet somebody like that.
Yeah. So when did you move here, were you born here, or you're born here? Okay.
I guess I think I'm what you would consider first generation. I don't know how that worked. Yeah. I'm from here, but both my parents came from their respective countries, and they met in New York City. You know.
Okay. So what were those family dynamics like when you were younger and you're starting to exhibit things that maybe kind of catch their attention. They have questions about. I mean, do you remember kind of going that far back?
Yeah, so like with me, it all began with a head jerk, and it kind of all ended with a head jerk. Like it's funny how things come full circle, because really one of my few tips now,
Yeah.
back then it was a head jerk, and now it's like a head, so it's really funny to me. But like I just remember, my nonna, my Italian grandma, she would see me, she didn't speak English well. And she would babysit me, and she would see my head jerks, and she'd be like, no, that's not nice, not in like a mean way, but she was just trying to communicate that she saw it as an anomaly.
Right.
But like I said, in a loving grandma way, not.
Yeah.
But but I mean, just to kind of sum it all up, I mean, it's really one of those things that was swept under the rug for my family. I mean, it was always kind of the elephant in the room. Like my dad, every once in a while, he would ask me, how he would kind of check up on my self-esteem. My dad was like a workaholic, so it's not like we had these, long conversations about it, but he would just kind of draw parallels between his own experience as a teenager with tics, and he would try to give me like advice about how to talk about it, and to be basically forthcoming with people. But it's very recently I didn't have a script to tell people until recently.
Okay,
so that's
gotcha.
my long answer to your question.
Yeah. So, I mean, so it was a late diagnosis, or did you already kind of have, in your mind that like, I know I got this, I don't need to be diagnosed, or what are the dynamics there?
That's a great question. So, like, for me, I feel like, number one, like kids these age, like kids on social media, they're so open about their Tourette's. Like it was something that I ignored, or I tried to ignore until somebody either kicked my chair in high school saying that I was ticking, or it's one of those things I really tried my best to ignore until other people pointed it out. Right.
Yep. Me too.
So I didn't even consider, right? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Same with you. So I didn't even consider that I had Tourette's, because we always read about it being severe, coprolalia, I mean, it's obscene what they do to us in the media, like how they portray us. Like, I was like, that's not me. Like, I didn't even consider it till I wasn't diagnosed till I was 18. I was about to go away to college in upstate New York. And I was like, I don't want to freak out when I'm up there. So let me figure out what's going on. I want to be socially accepted.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Especially considering like I was probably going to be one of the few people of color there. So I was like, it's like a double anomaly. I just wanted to fit in, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's my backstory. I mean, I just kind of hid it away because I was worried I would just kind of, disenfranchise myself and not have a way to fit in with anybody. And I would just be the guy with Tourette Syndrome. And that's, the guy who's unhireable, and the guy who, can't go out in public without, it's just, and but that was always more in my head than it was a reality. And kind of referring back to my friend on Instagram saying like, dude, I haven't noticed things like you noticed them about yourself. But yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, continue.
No, sorry, not to cut you off. I just want to ask you, when were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed when I was like 5 or 6. So this would have been the mid 1980s. And at a time, where my parents, they didn't have a lot to go on. I think this was the first time they had ever heard of Tourette syndrome. And it was just otherwise, just a hyperactive kid with a whole lot of tics and quirks, and maybe they'll level off, when he grows up, that kind of thing. And they didn't. But it was a Tourette diagnosis early on for me.
Well, like while we're on this topic, it's interesting to me. So number one, I want to ask you: do you think you were at an advantage being diagnosed earlier, or do you wish you were diagnosed later, like me?
That's a really good question, because. And I don't know. I think yes and no. I do like that me being diagnosed at a young age, my parents definitely wanted me to have a sense of context for myself. So we would go to Tourette syndrome conferences, like Tourette Association conferences. And that was a really, really great frame of reference for me, seeing other people who have TS, adults, kids, teenagers, you name it. And they all have different kinds of tics. And I'm kind of observing them and saying like, just kind of really get an appreciation for how broad and dynamic and different it can be for everybody. But otherwise, I think also kind of carrying all that with me, because it was quickly becoming a part of my identity as a kid. There was a newspaper article about me having Tourette syndrome, and it was quickly becoming me, not necessarily as like the kid with Tourette syndrome, but I think I was trying to, especially at that young age, wanting to be my own person and not the person that everybody else was going to assign me to. Like, you got Tourette syndrome, but you're talented and you can do good things in this world and all that. I just wanted to kind of do good things in this world and not think about what I was supposed to be or who I was. That was kind of the mentality I had at the time. And I think there was a lot of pressure. And so I think there was good and bad with that. But I think it was also just because of the time period. I didn't feel like I necessarily had a community around me that I could reach out to. There weren't any, like internet groups or anything like that at the time. And so, I think if I was going through this nowadays, I kind of feel like I would be in a better position with the sense of community that you can find online and, Instagram, the way you and I kind of found each other. And I feel like I would have a better outcome than I did back then, which is why I want to talk to a lot of people who have been diagnosed, say a way long time ago, some of the old guard of Tourette syndrome, to see kind of how they felt about that. Because that's a really good question.
So do you think that it's, I don't think you could group their response into one thing. Like, most of them said, oh, they're glad that but what do you think, if you could see any commonality in their response? Like, were they happy that they were diagnosed earlier, or do they wish, it was delayed, like with my case?
Yeah, I don't know. I really want to find this out. Like, I feel like I'm writing this down right now.
No, I just wanted to while we're on this topic, I started the 7 days of Tourette's to really try to open that dialogue with people, and also to practice my vlogging skills, because I got so tired of using my various issues as a crutch to not express myself as well as I can. Like, I would avoid speaking, I would avoid going outside, and photography and making videos all led me from hiding in my room, because I very literally did hide in my room for a year after I moved. I moved into this new environment, and that set my tics like into a craziness, and I hid for a year in my room, and then I started the 7 days of Tourette's, and it changed my life. So I just want to say that.
Yeah. I want to talk. So that was the next note I had. I definitely want to cover this. You got some champions out there with that hashtag. Peter does videos constantly. Peter's out.
Yeah. He's a supporter from day one. Yeah.
He's amazing. And he uses that so you can just kind of see him going through his day, and, just, this is me in my daily life, and I can talk about whatever's on my mind. And, here I am with the kids, he's
a great guy, man. He's
such a great guy.
He's a champion of that hashtag. And I also just feel like he's a role model, as to what it means to be successful and productive with somebody with Tourette syndrome. I met him at the Tourette Syndrome Association meetup, and that was the farthest I went from my house in over a year and a half, actually, that day.
Wow.
So it was because my neck tics were really debilitating, man. I would have I'm not even exaggerating when I would say I would have 20 tics in a minute of my neck, because I was dealing with personal things, and it was just leaving me homebound. I really let it get in the way of living my life. And I'm really monologuing about this because me meeting him that day was life changing, because I showed myself that I could take public transportation without freaking out. I showed myself that I could talk to people. It was life changing. Starting that hashtag and meeting Peter and meeting you is life changing. I'm surprising myself of my ability to communicate to you right now. So,
yeah, no, it's kind of funny because that's how I feel about it. I kind of feel like on the podcast, I come off maybe more eloquent than I view myself, because I don't necessarily sound like this when I'm out there in the world talking to other people, colleagues. I can handle myself, but when it comes to just really feeling like I'm in my element and comfortable and confident, just having these conversations, this is, I think, the kind of pinnacle of that, where I feel completely at ease. I'm still ticking and stuff like that, but that's just because I'm talking with another Touretter, and that's just kind of the way it works. But I feel good, and I feel like everything I described earlier, that sense of pressure with communication, I don't have when I'm talking to somebody like you.
I know what you mean. So it's weird, because I just have to go back to the analogy about the tightrope, in that I'm super comfortable right now, super comfortable, and my blocks are not representative of me being nervous. Which even our tics have been called nervous tics. are people just call our disorders, for lack of a better term, they base it out of nervousness, but it's like walking the tightrope again for me, the speaking thing where I just have these blocks sometimes. So but I was just thinking, I don't want to meander through topics, but I mean, I feel like all these topics are very related.
Be right back. The Tourette Association of America has been around since 1972, and today is the premier nonprofit in the U.S. working for all people affected by Tourette and tic disorders. One of the ways that happens is through communications and awareness tools, which is one of the reasons why the Tourette Association is the primary sponsor of this podcast. They help me out a lot, and you can find tons of information on their website, tourette.org, TOURETTE.org. And I want to thank them for their support of Tourette's podcast. The 7 Days of Tourette's hashtag. Could you kind of walk through the history of that a little bit and just sort of like what the spark was where you put that out there and kind of how it grew?
Yeah, so it started earlier on this year in almost in 2018. Time's passing by. Early, like January or February, 2019. I had just gotten comfortable vlogging from last year, in late 2018. I started a YouTube to really kind of vent because I was having trouble with my landlord and my tics. We all know that life stress causes your tics to explode usually. Mm-hmm. And I use YouTube as a platform to really get comfortable vlogging. And I'm a musician, or I used to really tour as a guitarist. That was even before photography. Guitar was my love, and the
mine too. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right. See, we have some commonalities. So
touring as well. Yeah, all the same stuff. This is funny.
Yeah. So I don't know. So you as a musician, you probably heard of the 100 Days of Practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this makes sense.
Now you're seeing, right? So I was like, I'm a big Hilary Hahn fan. I've been learning violin. I don't play as well as Hilary Hahn, but I follow her on social media, and I was entranced with her basically putting like non-perfect content, her showing her process of learning a piece. It's not perfect, but she's so amazing. So I was like, why don't I use this as a model to, number one, get more comfortable talking about Tourette syndrome, and number two, use something I'm already comfortable with, which is Instagram. As a photographer, I'm posting on Instagram a lot, Yeah. So I basically just I didn't reinvent the wheel. I just use it. I use a model, the 100 Days of Practice, and I was like, first it was 100 days of Tourette's, and if you could imagine taking for 100 days, it would be tired out. So I was like, a week is long enough.
And so when it kind of gets out there and other people are using the hashtag too, so other people's stories kind of get conveyed through the use of the hashtag that you kind of put out in the world.
Well, I really think that I genuinely remember Peter being the first person, like anybody listening to this, like if you were the first person, like, I'm sorry. I just remember Peter messaging me a video message with like a thumbs up, being like, you're doing like a great job. And like, that was one of the first responses that I got to the 7 Days of Tourette's. And I was like, I'm doing something amazing. Like I thought I was going to get trolled. Like I thought people were going to F with me big time, but I got nothing but love. And it just goes to show you that, people aren't as bad as I thought they were. You're very paranoid.
It's so funny, like punching through that sort of membrane of, it's just like whatever's on the other side of this. Are they going to troll you? Or are people going to make fun of you? Or are people going to? Are you going to Are you going to wind up in a meme yourself? Yeah. But it's like once you get out there and you kind of punch through that, and you're like kind of in the clearing. It's like Logan's Run, kind of getting outside of the dome and like, oh, I can breathe this air. Like, this is fine. Like, this is not what I thought. And you kind of just, it's just the amount of confidence that you can get from that. Yes. Yeah.
It's fear. Yeah. It's really what it is. And it's one of those things. Like I just, as I was listening to you, I just made the weird comparison. Like it almost feels like asking out a really hot girl where it's like, there's all this like internal struggle of like, you don't know if she's going to laugh at you, but it's like multiplied because the internet is the hot girl.
Yeah.
it's at scale. It's stress at scale, making content about Tourette syndrome and posting it on social media. You know, the stress is all internal. That's all I just wanted to just say.
I guess specific to Tourette syndrome, to make it specific, is what you were saying about stress setting off your tics. That's that's a pretty standard thing with people who have TS, anxiety, and just these really tense situations that can cause you to have these tic flare-ups. And that is what that's one of the things. I mean, it hurts getting shot down no matter what, or getting ridiculed, or, I mean, no matter who you are, that's going to hurt. But if you take it to heart, it's really going to hurt. But the fear of that situation where I'm going to put myself in a situation where maybe I'm a failure in this moment, that's going to exacerbate my stress and my anxiety. I'm going to start ticking. People are going to notice that. People are going to point that out about me. That's going to make everything worse. It's tough to get the courage to bother when you've had bad experiences before.
Yeah, I just want to interject. Like, all right, so there's this thing where it's like, I feel like I don't know where to draw the line between Tourette's and my. I don't know where to draw the line between Tourette's and my personality, or Tourette's and my self-esteem, because it's almost like they're so linked. Like, if my tics are bad, then I'm bad.
It's kind of funny because that question comes up a lot of, how much of your Tourette syndrome is you, like, is actually you at the soul, and if your TS went away, how different would you actually be? Or if you went back in time and the cure existed hypothetically, and you took the pill and you never had it, how different would your life be? And I mean, I think it's obvious that it would be pretty radically different in terms of outcomes and experiences and confidence levels and all that. But that's what makes me just kind of, it's like my TS is really a heavy part of my personality.
It really is. Like, there's so many commonalities between people with Tourette's, man. Like, I don't think I've met a person with Tourette's yet that doesn't like coffee. I know that they're out there, or not tea, or something else that's kind of like a vice. Like, we all have our vices. Everybody does. People without Tourette's, but I just feel like, so, like, going back to what you mentioned, like, I think that you can't. If in a hypothetical universe, in an alternate universe, if we took a pill that abolished our Tourette's, our tics, which is a main symptom that people use as a metric for Tourette's, I think it would change our personality. I think it would change our humor. Like, it wouldn't just be tics; it would change everything.
When you were a kid with tics, and I mean, were you showing a pretty dynamic range of them? And have they kind of? I mean, the tics always fluctuate over time, but are they more intense now, or have they gotten better, or where are you with that?
That's a really good question. So, like you said, they wax and wane. I would say, okay, so like I said earlier on, my first tic was like a head jerk backwards, kind of like I was like nodding at, kind of like I was putting like my chin up towards you. I think it's called retrocillus. The neurological term for that. So that was one of my first tics, and then it kind of progressed to eye blinking and sniffing. By the time I was in like middle school, I just remember kids mocking my eye blinking and my head jerks, and it kind of stabilized throughout high school. It was really basically always eye blinks. I had some tongue protrusion in high school, but college I used to have these hand jerks. So I'm just seeing it kind of progressing from my head to the rest of my body as time went on. But I'm just just to really sum it all up. My tics are the most severe they've ever been in the past couple of years.
Do you think that's
due to life?
Okay, so that's a life stress type thing?
Oh yeah, majorly. I would definitely. Yeah.
Do you do anything to try to find any relief, or any medications, or so we talked about photography as a therapeutic exercise, but just as anything else that kind of helps.
I'm not able to visit a doctor right now. It's like an insurance thing. But I'm looking to kind of get that sorted out. I've tried medication in the past. Like, I genuinely don't think it helps. I genuinely think that I would benefit from something like habit reversal therapy, or like CBT, cognitive therapy. I think might be applicable for somebody with tics. But I mean, I've tried therapy, just like things to mitigate my anxiety, and just to sum it all up. I actually rushed back here to make our call because I was running before. I've been running daily to really incorporate exercise, and I do take more when I run. In case you were wondering that.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, because I try to stay. I love walking. I'm kind of an avid walker, and I jog occasionally. But when it comes to something a little bit more athletic, I have breathing tics that get in the way. I'll do this thing where I'll just keep my eyes closed for a minute while I'm running, and it definitely interferes. But do you feel kind of like a net positive?
Net positive is an excellent way to put it. I think that, you said earlier on about punching through a membrane, about how it's so hard to kind of put ourselves out there on social media and be vulnerable. I think that I use Tourette's as an excuse not to exercise, because my neck tics, depending on the day, obviously, would be pretty severe. To the point that I'm not even in the zone anymore running. I'm wondering if everyone is looking at me, wondering if I'm on drugs, or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's net positive, to answer your question. It's a massive net positive, because it helps with anxiety. So
with music as well. So is that something that's been kind of a lifelong thing with you? That's another thing that is a pretty repeat topic with Touretters on this podcast.
Yeah, I started playing guitar when I was like 12 or 13. I remember, being like that weird kid in a Catholic school, because I went to Catholic school, which was hilarious, by the way.
I did too, man. We're the same person.
Yeah, we really are, man. I love it. It's like meeting like my long lost brother. It's great.
Yeah.
But I was that weird kid that loved Slipknot in like Catholic school. Like Korn, all those new metal bands.
Right, yeah.
Like my first guitar, I got shoveling snow with my friend here in New York, and like my parents didn't want to get me one, but we like split it, and I got a BC Rich Warlock, just like Mick Thompson from Slipknot.
Man, I had a BC Rich Warlock too. This is crazy.
Yeah, isn't it funny?
That's such a specific guitar too, because it's not like you walk into a music store and you see the Fender Stratocaster and the Telecaster and the Les Paul and all the standard guitars. Then the Warlock is like the one that you often see in the pawn shop that is shaped kind of like a spider or something. It has like this heavy metal kind of look to it. And it's funny.
Eye patch, because it's so pointy,
Yeah.
But I just remember, I that was my first guitar, and I just remember trying to play Slipknot, and I did that. And then a couple years later, I got really into neoclassical, like Yngwie Malmsteen. System of a Down came previous to that. I was just progressing through the styles, and I worked at a music store, Sam Ash. I'm sure you know what Sam Ash. You've heard of Sam Ash.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. So I worked there, and then I met a doctor, like a physician who's a musician, and we became friends. He went to Ivy League school, and like he introduced me to this Harvard-trained lawyer called Breon Bain, and I toured with him in a hip-hop musical play called Lyrics from Lockdown. And I toured, I wrote music, we performed at MIT, Harvard, I went to Singapore, I went to all these crazy places, all because of music, basically. Not to brag.
That's amazing.
I'm just so proud of that, because it's one of the few cool things that I've done.
Yeah. I mean, you should be talking about that. I mean, So I didn't do any overseas touring, but it was my way of getting to know the United States and just kind of see, you get out in the world and you see how different cities behave and different parts of the country behave, and kind of what the speed of different areas is. And it was really edifying to just kind of get out. Yeah,
I just wanted to say, did I see that you're in North Carolina, or am I thinking of someone else?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah. And I was just gonna confirm. So you play guitar, right? Is that your main instrument? Or are you a multi-instrumentalist? What?
Yeah, I play guitar, bass, drums, but guitar was my first. Actually, violin was my first, and
cool.
That was just the instrument my parents gave me, and I didn't really appreciate until I get to guitar, and that's where the world kind of opens up for me. I'm like, this feels right. This is exactly what I want to do, and I'm teaching myself things, and then my dad bought me a really cheap electric guitar when I was, I think, 11 years old. And
It's a good age.
but yeah, it's always been it's always been there for me.
Yeah, like I genuinely, not to get dark, but I don't know if I'd be here if it wasn't for guitar. Like I went through. I mean, my dad, passed away when I was 21.
Oh, wow.
Cancer, and like if I didn't have music and writing, my dad was an English teacher, so like he loved to read and I love to write. So like I feel like if I didn't have music to lean back on, I don't know where I'd be. Like I'd be even more lost than I already feel some days. So yeah.
Do your tics kind of present themselves differently when you're playing, or do they go away? Or some people say they get in the zone and they, and I guess with me is like I may be ticking when I'm playing, but it doesn't really bother me because I'm just kind of enjoying it.
Well, here's the thing, these questions, these are excellent questions, but it's like a two-way street where it's like, if you have tics, they could disrupt you from getting in the zone.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, at least if it's severe enough. I mean, like when I was 21, if you asked me this question, I would be like, I don't tic at all when I'm playing guitar. Like that would be the truth. That wasn't delusional. That would be the truth. But I would say nowadays, depending on the day, because I just have so much day-to-day stress right now, that I wouldn't be surprised if I did tic while playing guitar. But once again, if I'm in the zone, then no. That's really what you're getting at. If I'm in the zone, then it wouldn't happen. I would say, for the most part.
Yeah, but that is a good point about having tics that may interfere with you getting there. Yeah. I remember from season 1, one of the guests, his name is Chris Clem, and he plays guitar. He's actually a multi-instrumentalist, but there can be tics that would interfere. I'm totally going by memory, recalling my interview with him, but there were tics that would interfere with his playing. That's something that did happen to me for a little period of time when I was playing bass with this touring group. And the bass I was playing, so I'm only like 5'5", and I was playing a Gibson Thunderbird bass, which is like the size of a tree.
Yeah.
And I had to really extend my arm to kind of get down to the bottom notes and at like near the headstock. And the strain of that created a tic to where I was kind of like almost blocking myself from being able to play anything accurately toward the headstock of the bass. And that was really frustrating. And that was actually a really kind of embarrassing time in my life because I feel I wasn't playing right. I wasn't playing well. And I felt like I was letting bandmates down and that sort of thing. And I wasn't talking about TS or anything like that. I was still very, very much closeted about the whole thing at that time period.
Not to interject, but I just wanted to say that, Tourette Syndrome, like a two-way street is, I can't think of a better analogy where it's like you have a disorder, but your disorder is responding to the environment. It's just not fixed. Like I just, just to give you my own example, I just remember my first year at Potsdam, New York, when I just got diagnosed earlier on. And that's a funny story. Maybe I'll say that later. But I just remember holding this girl's hand, and like I just kept jerking my hand, and like she would notice, and then she for lack of a better word, she was like, "Oh, you're twitching," and I didn't know how to respond to her. So there's a tactile thing where you touch something and it may trigger like a tic.
Yeah.
And I just had an energy drink too. I should say that. So that's an important part of the story. I'm not good at telling stories, but I don't think it was related. I just had it. So yeah.
Well, what's the story about the diagnosis piece?
Yeah. So like I don't have the best memory, but like I swear to God. All right. So I saw my neurologist, when I was like 18, and then I didn't see him for like another like 10 years. Actually, for whatever reason, I guess like my tics weren't severe enough for it to warrant me. But the reason I didn't go back to him, because I swear to God, this guy never told me that I had Tourette syndrome. He just said that I had tics. He's adamant about the fact that he told me that I had the Tourette's. I just remember so like when I was there, the first time that I went into his office, it was me and my mom, and he was just observing me and we all know that the more we feel like somebody's watching us, the more we hold it in. So he wasn't really getting a full clinical picture, for lack of a better term. So I just remember him, him acknowledging the fact that I had tics. I do not remember Tourette syndrome being part of the conversation. And then I see him 10 years later, and he's like, "Don't you remember? Like, you have Tourette's." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "28." Like, "What? What are you talking about?" And I'm 31 now. I'm like, I don't remember you telling me this. So, it's funny to me. Doctors need to communicate better.
What's the deal? And there's this guy who's kind of been sitting on your secret, so to speak, for a decade.
And I mean, to be fair, he might have, but he probably said it in passing. It was probably like, oh, this syndrome exists, and you might be on the less severe end of the spectrum. I don't remember him explicitly saying. Right. I want to make it clear. Like, I don't think my neurologist is a bad neurologist. It's just that I don't remember him being clear about it. I just want to make that clear. So. Gotcha. Yeah. I just wanted to ask you, how did you get over the hump of not being embarrassed? Because I got to say, man, I haven't reached that point yet.
It's I will say I'm maybe 90% not embarrassed. Like there's still situations where, if it's so where I work is kind of a political environment, and there are elected officials that I have to interact with really routinely, and there are board meetings and there are gatherings, and I don't want some of these discussions, I guess, it's at board meetings and the sense of concentration and focus you need during those things. I don't want to be the distraction in the room. At the same time, I know that I shouldn't be viewed that way. If people understand what I'm going through, then ideally it should be no big deal to them. It should make sense to them, and it's not me just having outbursts and interrupting conversation. But I still don't want that to happen to where I have a tic that kind of stops discussion, or some of my vocal tics have been, I guess, a little bit more prominent at work.
Yeah, and when it's quiet, maybe.
Yeah, it's a quiet place, but luckily my coworkers around me they're so cool, they're so understanding, and then they just kind of go with it. Again, because I've explained myself, and it makes sense to them that that's what that is. This is not some annoying thing, like it probably bothers him more than it does me, that sort of thing, and they get that, and that's really, really cool. But to answer your question, it wasn't until very recently that I kind of, opened up publicly about having TS. Like, my very, very close friends knew. My wife knows, obviously, but it was not a part of my sort of, it's still not a part of my daily discourse, but it was not something that people around me knew. I'm 39 now, and it wasn't until I was almost 38 that I opened up about it. It was the beginning of 2018, late 2017. Wow. And it was just the realization of like, because I think I saw something on Twitter about Tourette Syndrome, or I saw somebody else who was talking about it, and it just kind of made me think more about it for myself, and running through the thoughts of like, what's the worst that could really happen? I feel like I'm kind of good at what I do professionally. I feel like I have some security there. I feel, and not necessarily that should be a precursor. Yeah. If you want to be open about your Tourette or not, your call, and everybody around you should respect whatever you want to do with that. Not talk about it or talk about it, or people should respect it. But I was just, I felt comfortable in my life enough to where I could talk about it, and it would be a dynamic of my life, but not something that would necessarily, I feel like they knew the other me. Yeah. My, whatever my talents were, or whatever I brought to the world, I felt like they knew that part of me and accepted that. And if I just started talking about Tourette Syndrome, I couldn't see those same people saying, we got a break from this guy. Like, we can't be seen with him anymore. It's just, that seems kind of like an absurd thought that would even be a possibility, that, the people in my life would abandon me because I have TS. And I never thought that would ever happen. Feeling. Yeah. But especially because in the past few years, my tics have really kind of stepped up a little bit.
Oh, so we have that in common too. Interestingly. Yeah. I know.
Yeah. It's not huge, but it's definitely graduated a little bit with, because I've in the past few years, I've bought a house, okay. I've got that sort of stress of the home ownership and the finances and all that. Just life changes that happen. And I feel like these kind of correspond with that, my sort of current menu of tics.
Well, okay. So I want to ask you, how did you disclose did you disclose to your employer that you have Tourette's? Or did you wait till after you were hired? Like, I feel like people could really benefit from hearing that. That's a question I have for you.
Yeah, it's so I was already at that particular job for about a year and a half, I guess. And I had already kind of known the people that I work with now. I had already kind of known them through associations in my previous employment, and I do a podcast for my employer. And so it comes up like, that's not the only podcast I do. Oh, what's your other podcast? Well, it's called Tourette's Podcast. I haven't talked with you about this, but I have Tourette Syndrome. And so I remember the first conversation I had with one of the most understanding people that I work with. Shout out to Erin, one of the lobbyists I work with. She was immediately fascinated and was cool about it and understanding as could be. And the takeaway, was just, well, you're still you. It's still, that was that was really refreshing. That it was a risk, it was an experiment, but talking about it, somebody immediately got it and was cool with it and had really intelligent questions about it, and that meant a lot. And so I was like, okay, that went well. I can do it again, and I can talk to more people about it.
That's an important thing about what you said about how you're vulnerable out in society or out in your place of employment about your Tourette's, and nobody trolls you. Nobody's like an asshole to you. And I think when that happens to us, it's our personal responsibility to update our beliefs about our self and how we view our self-esteem, and we need to update that. And for me, that hasn't happened.
So
right?
No, it's so true, because I had all kinds of conversations with myself after that about just sort of like, what else in this world am I maybe scared of that is maybe kind of overblown, or maybe I've just like totally fabricated this scenario in my mind as like a fact of what's going to happen if this thing that I'm scared of, happens in the world. And so, yeah, I've kind of recalibrated, and it's made me a lot more confident. I feel just way better in my day to day. And it makes me curious about other people more too, just from having these conversations and learning about all these just really bizarre commonalities that we have. I mean, you and I have discovered like 1,000 intersections that we both have, that we've both been at the same time. And it makes me really curious about other people's stories and kind of what they go through, not to pry, but just to kind of appreciate what anybody wants to talk about with me. And that's kind of a nice new feeling as well. But the point that you're making about just sort of how I view everybody else around me and what they're thinking about me and all that, yeah, I've totally recalibrated with that. And that is a really, really good feeling, being able to do that and kind of cleaning out some of the junk from your head that's, kind of been sabotaging you, and in ways that you probably don't even realize. And it just feels like an overall dramatic life improvement.
So I'm just having these thoughts as I'm listening to you. I don't know about you, but I genuinely feel like there was a certain point in my life, and I feel like I'm outgrowing this, that I was almost putting myself down for my tics because I was anticipating other people would. So I was trying to. It's almost like taking poison. Yeah. So when you're actually poisoned, you're not poisoned as badly, like antidote, not antidote, but it's like you're preparing yourself to be poisoned by ingesting your own poison, so for lack of a better term. I don't know. It's really weird.
Yeah. That's something that I think it was season 2, episode 1, might have been 3. I think it was season 2, episode 1. The guest, her name was Jaleesa, and that was a point that she was making, is that sort of the sort of external value that you put on yourself and how you broadcast that to the world is really how they're going to treat you. And if you see yourself as just a lowly, oh, don't bother with me, or kind of like an Eeyore type person, that's really how people are going to view you and will regard you. And that's how they're going to calibrate themselves when they are dealing with you.
It really is. It's one of the reasons why, in a weird way, it's one of the reasons why jerks get ahead and nice guys finish last. Although I don't know if I want to say that, but like what I'm saying, I don't want to say nice guys.
I got you, yeah.
What I am saying is it's one of the reasons why, the more confident, and people do mix up cockiness with confidence, but the more confident you act, the better quality people you attract. You attract more confident people, and you attract more lucrative opportunities when you act more confident.
Right. Yeah. People want to invest in you when they feel comfortable with the way you carry yourself. I mean, that's a big thing, to give people that confidence that whatever they're investing in you, and I'm not necessarily talking about money, but just whatever they're investing in you, that they feel good about that. I'm definitely like a people curious person. different types of personalities and just kind of how people carry themselves. And that's another reason why I like street photography a lot, because I feel like people are really confident when they're kind of walking, when they have a destination or a purpose and people are walking somewhere. I feel like people kind of, they're getting it right. Like they look confident and they know their routine, and there's not a whole lot of guessing, I guess, unless they're walking around lost or something. But that's why I like street photography a lot. Just connecting with that kind of personality and seeing that out there in the world, and you kind of have a storyline in your head about what's this. I'm the way I'm describing it is not how I say it in my head, but I think the thought process is just kind of, who is this person, and and them in their element, and capturing that is. It does make a good photograph. It does make if you're in an interesting environment, someone looks confident, they're doing their thing, you feel good about them, you want to photograph them. And that's kind of why I like that so much. And I'm kind of rambling here.
Perfect sense. I just wanted to interject and ask you, you mentioned, or you kind of alluded to your process of street photography. So you ask permission whenever you're photographing.
Yeah, I didn't used to. So I do both, because so there's the one angle of street photography where you want to be invisible and you want to capture the environment exactly as it is without the camera kind of influencing what's happening around. Because, if you're walking around with like a big, fat, chunky DSLR, then, you look like a photographer and people are going to be like, oh, sorry, getting out of your way. It's that kind of thing. And you would just rather the environment be itself, so you can kind of capture that moment. And for anybody listening, I feel like I have to say this for anybody listening. I think the way I'm describing it kind of sounds creepy and imposing. And I would never take a photo of anybody in an embarrassing moment or anything like that. It's more about the urban environment and what it's like at that specific point in time, the way the light is falling on it, what the people look like, what they're dressed like, what the different colors are, and kind of capturing that moment as a document. That's why I love that kind of street photography. And then the other kind is where the bonus of just connecting with somebody in a way that I would never otherwise, and having a moment with that person. And it's kind of funny. I don't get shot down very much. I usually, like I said, I will maybe notice something about a person, whether maybe they have an interesting hat or their glasses or just something about them, and they look like maybe they're a bit approachable, and the environment is kind of nice. The light is falling the right way. It just looks like something that, if you're a photographer, this looks like a nice picture to make. And so I'll walk up to them and I'll tell them just purely honestly, like, hey, I noticed your hat. I really like how, would you mind if I took a photograph? And doing it in a way that I don't really put too much negative energy on the camera. And kind of going back to what we were saying about, the way you talk about yourself and value yourself and appraise yourself is how other people are going to as well. And I kind of apply that when I ask other people, and I try to make it a positive experience and not put sort of like, you're going to shoot me down, but can I take your picture? I just try to like infuse a good feeling into it. And it is sincere. I do want to take a nice photo of this person, and I'll offer to give it to them and email it to them, that sort of thing. And it's just been a nice way to connect with people and have a moment where I'm talking with somebody about their life for a second. And I would never, ever have that experience otherwise. Without the camera, would never have a reason to go up and talk to them. And I've met so many people, and actually just today, I'll post this on Instagram in a little bit, but I was walking past the bus station in downtown Raleigh, and I saw somebody that I had taken a photograph of maybe a few months ago, and it was a really quick thing. But I remembered her, and she remembered me, and she came up to me and she gave me a hug. And she was decked out. She had her pea coat on and her glasses and hat. And I was like, "Can I get another photograph of you? You look great today." And she was so happy with it. Took the photographs of her, showed her the picture on the back of the camera. Loved it. And I was like, "I'm going to send this to you. I'm going to get this printed out. Like, this is a cool photo." And it was, and I was really proud of it. But more than just making a photo, I was just happy with that interaction that would never have happened.
Let me
otherwise.
ask you this. I have two questions. have you ever had any confrontations in photographing? Because I have. Jesus Christ.
Man, I've always been wary about that. Something happened recently. There was a street photographer who got bloodied in London because he took a photograph, and I think like in the composition, there was like a man and woman, like kissing or having a moment or something like that, and they noticed him, and the guy went after him and beat him up and smashed his camera, and yeah, and it's the kind of thing where it's like, I mean, violence is never okay, but I can, I can see the ingredients that made that situation happen, and so I'm always kind of nervous about that kind of thing. I feel like I'm inconspicuous when I'm just doing the sort of urban environment documentation. But if there is ever a situation where someone comes up to me and says, "Did you just take a picture of me?" And my policy is just sort of full honesty of like, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm out here. I'm a street photographer. I'm taking photographs just downtown. You happen to be in this shot, but I'll delete it if you don't want it. Here's what it looks like. If, it could be that they like the photograph because it might have come out kind of stylishly, but if they don't like it, whatever, I'll just delete it. There's 1,000 more photographs I can take today.
So to respond to that, you really have to, for all the photographers listening, especially if they do street photography, you already know this, but you really have to really take it on a case by case scenario. Because if it's like an imposing dude who he's looking to start a fight, and then you admit that you took a photograph of him, I mean, he could ask you for money. I mean, he could feel like now you owe him something. So like, obviously, I don't think I'm being out of pocket here. I mean, these things I can see happening, but I wanted to ask you, how do you think the psychiatric component of Tourette's, how do you think it influences how you shoot photography? Because I know that it does for me, the anxiety.
Yeah. I think what I was talking about earlier with seeing people kind of where they appear to be in their element, they look confident and all that. I feel like that is what I want to capture, because those are the people that make me feel less stressed and good. When I feel like someone feels good about what they're doing, I feel good about it too. And it's just kind of a good environmental thing to be around. So I like capturing images of people who maybe, and this is whether I'm doing, when I say I like capturing images of people, this is in the context of me asking somebody for permission and going up to them and, just taking a street portrait of them. But I like to kind of capture them where I feel, so here's the trick that I do. As I'm kind of winding up to take the photo, I'm already taking photos to kind of capture more of a candid moment versus the posed smile sort of thing. And then, in that sort of candid moment is a moment where I feel like they are being truly themselves. They're winding up for this photograph, but they're also kind of they're not just posing with the smile. They're kind of being themselves in this quick moment that I happen to capture. And I'm not being sneaky about it because, I'll show it to them. I'm saying like, this is my favorite photo. Like, this is a good photo right here. And they'll be happy with it because I feel like they look kind of dignified. And so that's always the angle that I've gone about it with, is that I want to vibe off the photograph based on the personality that person is kind of communicating through the photo that I was able to capture. And a lot of that is kind of retrospective, I guess, it kind of looking back and here's the photograph. This is exactly what I was looking for. But I do know the feeling that I want to get from the photograph that I'm about to take. And so I feel like the sort of you're asking specifically about TS kind of coloring and how I go about it. I think just I think just my interest in people and kind of what they are and what goes on in their brains, that sort of thing. And me hoping that it's, something good that I can relate to, is why I want to capture that moment where I feel like, they look dignified, they're smiling, but it's not the posed moment. Like that's what they thought that they were winding up for. But I captured this other photo that really kind of captured who they are. And it's all just being rooted in interesting people.
I almost, all right, so I was going to ask you, what do you think about like the Bruce Gilden approach? I'm sure you've heard of Bruce Gilden.
Yeah, I have problems with that because, and there are some other street photographers who do this too. And just to set it up for people who don't know, Bruce Gilden is a legendary street photographer.
Yes.
He shoots for Magnum Photos, I believe, and he's been around forever. And his approach is kind of confrontational. He'll take a flash, and he's got his camera. I think he shoots Leica cameras, and he'll be going across a crosswalk, and he'll get in somebody's face with the camera and the flash to kind of capture a moment where they look surprised or maybe kind of horrified, or if someone has a problem with that, then he doesn't care. He's like, I've never really subscribed to his way of doing it, especially because sometimes I feel like the way he edits his photographs, I feel like he tries to kind of bring out the
grit.
Yeah, that like this is good. Yeah, I was about to say a way that sounded nicer than it actually was, is that he's trying to bring out the imperfections. And imperfections can be beautiful, but I feel like he's kind of pushing it into the grotesque. But interesting, yes, but I feel like it's kind of the opposite of the way I go about it.
I almost wonder if, I mean, this has been well talked about, but if, artists create their art based on how they view themselves. So maybe look, and I just want to say this, I love a lot of his work.
Yeah, me too.
If you just listen to this, I would love to meet you, but, and I respect him, but I wonder, him being like a Brooklynite, like a tough old school Brooklynite colors, how he shoots and maybe how he views himself. I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. Because in its context, there is some sense in it, in the context that he does it. I think the one thing that I worry about is, so, you and I, we have Tourette Syndrome, we have our comorbidities, but his sort of confrontational way of doing it, I worry, what if there's someone who has a huge sensitivity to light or flashes or just to being engaged in a really, kind of sudden way like that.
Someone who was in Iraq or in a war, that could be jarring to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it can be jarring. And he doesn't know in advance the life of the person that he's about to photograph. And so if the standard is to be kind of, right in somebody's face with the flash, you could really hurt somebody. And that's always kind of, I think when I first saw his images, I was totally hypnotized by them because there's really nothing like them. I mean, everybody just look up Bruce Gilden, Gilden. I mean, his work is, it's stunning, but the process of it is, I think, always kind of sat oddly with me.
Yeah, he has like the paparazzi approach, but even paparazzi photos. I mean, his photos kind of are reminiscent of a paparazzi, but they don't compare to his photos. His photos are much, and we should talk about how he gets very close up. He gets very close, like almost like a kiss sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted, I want to, and I'm going to please don't laugh, I'm going to mispronounce this photographer's name. Henry Cartier. I don't know how to say his name properly. Sorry. But
he's sort of a legendary kind of pioneering street photographer, and I love a lot of his work.
Yeah, no, the only reason why I'm because just to compare and contrast the styles was he's a much more late, like he's not in your face. I almost wondered if actually he may have had social anxiety. I don't know. I don't know, but just how careful he was at hiding the fact that he was taking a photo, almost like he was afraid of confrontation, or more likely he didn't want to disturb the actual scene. That was probably more likely.
Yeah, this is an interesting question for, I think, for other photographers listening. I mean, I know there's a lot of them because I've talked to a lot of them, people who listen, people who have TS who are into photography and see it really the same way that you and I were talking about it earlier. But yeah, that's a good question for the audience, that if you're into photography, do you find yourself the kind of person who wants to be a little bit more gonzo about it, or is your connection to photography, kind of capturing the moment as it is, or because, and the reason I'm asking it that way is it takes nerves to kind of bring people into it, and even if you're doing it in a candid way, it takes nerves to involve other people, because people can be really nervous about cameras and surveillance and what's this going to be used for? Are you making money off this? Are you that sort of thing. And for me, it's I do photography for a living, but when I'm doing something like that, it's more for the enjoyment of just kind of being out and doing it, and the therapy of walking out in the world and connecting with my environment. It's how I got to know the town I live in now, which I've lived in for about 3 years. And, it's an unfamiliar place, and I get out with my camera and I start taking photographs of the details, and it makes it feel more at home to me because I can bring this SD card back home, edit the photos, feel good about it, kind of, even put my own little, spin on the colors or whatever. But that act is how I got, familiar with the town I live in, and I felt good about it. And I can see, I can go back to the same location that I took a photograph in one day, and it'll look different, or I'll go at a different time of day where the light is hitting it differently and it'll look different. But it just allowed me to pay attention to these details that really made me kind of feel more at home in the town that I live in. And now I do that when I go out traveling. I want to kind of get to know better these places where I go and photograph the details, and maybe even see if I can take a portrait or two of people. But that's just been a very enriching thing.
Yeah, I'm working my way up to that, man. I just want to give you, Ben, like you should get mad like props for actually with all the anxiety that we people with Tourette syndrome, most of us deal with, to actually break that membrane, like you so appropriately said. That's so hard, and like you should. I wish I could do that, and one day I definitely will. But I just wanted to say, I actually am realizing that the places that I photograph, it makes it easier for me to return to them and be less anxious, even when I'm not photographing them. It's like therapy for me. I don't know if
absolutely
you experience that.
Yeah, I don't know if this is how you mean it, but that familiarity, there's a warmth to it, and the fact that I feel like I know something about it that other people around me perhaps don't. It's just I feel a link to these things and to the people I take photographs of, to the places I've been that I've photographed. I mean, I go back, and I got married in Amsterdam, which is a wonderful place for photography.
Yeah.
And that there was one afternoon where my then fiance, she was getting her hair done, and I just had, a couple hours to kill by myself. And that's what I did. It was the only thing that was on my mind, of just going out with my little Ricoh GR camera and just taking photographs of, people on bicycles, zooming past, and the boats going down the canal, and that sort of thing. It's just, I could do that, and I could walk around without a camera and love it and observe it and absorb it. But putting that sort of mission into it, where I want to document it and make it look good and make it more than just a memory, is something that's been really, really helpful to me. And it just in terms of just having that warm familiarity with something. Could be anything, people, places, things, but
absolutely,
that's exactly why I do that. Yeah.
Like what I'm realizing just by talking to you, I don't think maybe subconscious, really what you're hearing now is things I probably realized in my subconscious, and they're coming forward to my brain because we're talking about it. I'm realizing that, there's this sensory overload that I have whenever I go to a new place. I'm bombarded by the details, by the noise, by the smells, and but I photograph it once, and when I revisit, it's almost like, I've seen that. It's not as overloading.
Yeah, exactly. I this is something I was even thinking about before we started talking, that I would have forgotten about had you not said it. But it calms the chaos of the situation for me. Like I feel like I can make more sense of it by kind of committing it to a photo and kind of conquering it, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm not sure if that's exactly how you mean it, but that is a way that I think about it.
Yeah, it's like photographing Everest. It looks big, but you can see the crevices and you can see the dip. Like it's like that. It's like photographing Everest.
Yeah. I'm hoping as we're talking that there are other people who, and actually shout out to Sophia. She's the admin for the Tourette's podcast discussion group, and we've been talking about photography a lot lately. But I'm hoping that this maybe even stoke some interest in people who are looking for
like an outlet,
maybe a new form of therapy or outlet, or just something to do in the world that may have a that may help you make a new kind of connection. And I mean, photography is you don't need to buy a high-end camera. I mean, it's almost any camera you can buy on the market nowadays is fantastic. And it's all about composition and how you work with it and how it makes you feel. And
light.
I couldn't recommend it any higher as an activity, not just because I like it, but I'm just saying I've recommended it to other people who've really, really enjoyed it as a therapy. And I think it could help a lot of people. Yeah.
Anything that you could do anywhere, especially if you're like in a social setting, like it could be knitting, it could be dance, like anything, obviously you can't play a piano, although we have an iPhone, there's a piano app, but like really like the message that I'm hearing you say is that it really helps to have something in your pocket to distract yourself from a tick attack. Cause that's really what we're kind of talking about, or the social anxiety, so.
Yeah. And the camera being something that is recognizable to other people and they know what it is. And even if they're wary of it, it's at least something that you can have a conversation over. And it's like
better than an antidepressant, because you can actually see it working. You can actually see it.
Yeah. And you have results that you can be proud of. I think that's another thing that really shouldn't be overlooked, because I was really pumping up the experience part of it. And that is my favorite thing, just the experience of taking photographs, but also having a photograph that you may be proud of or that you can give to somebody. I think it can make people around you feel good. That's another thing too. And if you find it as a form of art that you are particularly good at too, that's another thing where, you should be putting that, art can be a very private thing for a lot of people, but I feel like, I would love to see art done by other people in the Tourette community, because I know I can relate to it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a good way to kind of help other people with awareness, just because art is a very easy, I think, kind of entry to understanding, what a person is and what their talents are, that kind of thing.
Man, I had a blast, man. This was a lot of fun.
Without a doubt, there's probably a million other sort of things we have in common, odd coincidences and things like that, that if, we kept this going another 6 hours, we could dredge up. But I mean, this has really, really been a lot of fun to talk about. I think a lot of people with TS who live kind of an isolated life and don't talk much about it, they don't know anybody else who has it, there's not much support in their community, it can be a very, very isolating thing. And to hear from somebody who might have something very unlikely in common with them can be a very, very uplifting thing.
Yeah. And I mean, if there's anybody listening right now that's living a life of isolation, just know that your own thoughts and your own opinions of yourself are a million times more damaging than anything that you assume other people think about you. And the sooner you get out of the Tourette's closet, as Ben so aptly said, the sooner you can start living your life to the fullest. It's the best thing that I did coming on this podcast, creating my account, my Instagram account, Mr. Move and Speak. It's the best thing that I did. And I just want to thank Ben for having me on here. And I would love to come back. Dude, I would talk for like another hour, but I'm actually studying web development. I have so much work to do. I'm trying to become a web developer. I'm behind, man. But this is so therapeutic, Ben.
Thanks for listening, Marco. I obviously love talking with you, and there's no way that's going to be the last time. I'm going to do a post on tourettespodcast.com pretty soon showcasing photography, kind of tying it in with the discussion we had here, and we can make it a pretty standing thing, I think. If you're proud of your photography or connect with it from a therapeutic standpoint, write me a sentence, just a sentence or two, just a tweet-length take on what photography does for you, and send me some photos illustrating that. And also tell me that I have permission to post them on the mothership, tourettespodcast.com. This may be a fire hose of content coming in, but I kind of hope so, because this could be kind of a fun, ongoing project. tourettespodcast@gmail.com. I'll post some of my own street portraits and other highlights that kind of sum up why I love it so much and why maybe you should give it a try too. And if you have any questions about that, like if you want to buy a camera, you want some ideas, again, tourettespodcast@gmail.com. The Facebook discussion group is a great place to talk about this stuff as well. Thanks to fellow photo maker Sophia, our wonderful discussion group administrator, who keeps everything going well there. Tell her thanks for that when you have the opportunity. So I'll be back next week with some details about Motherless Brooklyn, again, the new movie from Ed Norton. He's playing a character with TS. It's based on the Jonathan Lethem book. Stay tuned, I'm excited. At Tourette'sPod on Twitter in the meantime, of course, the discussion group on Facebook, tourettespodcast.com on Instagram, which is another good place to post some Tourette photography. By the way, shout out to Kimmy from Season 3, Episode 7. She models for photographers, and we've talked about doing a Tourette photography project. Or just some photos for fun, but that's going to happen soon. Patreon.com/Tourette'sPodcast if you'd like to personally support the show. Our primary sponsor is the Tourette Association of America, online with tons of resources and information to help you learn about and safely sail the mysterious seas of Tourette Syndrome. It affects us in different ways. Mild to severe, but everybody affected by it feels it pretty deeply, no matter. It's the companion in our lives, the twin that we love and hate. Are there any twins out there with Tourette Syndrome? Whoa, hang on. Let me look this up. Okay, so I just typed that into Google, and the first result in my search, I didn't plan this, is Tourette.org, the website of the Tourette Association of America. So I'm looking at a page called Genetics Q&A, and it's got a question. And you know, I'm going to go ahead and read this. I mean, why not? I can just edit this out if it's no good. Anyway, the question says, I am the father of identical twin boys with Tourette syndrome. I met a man in his 60s who doesn't have TS, but his identical twin brother does. What do you know about the prognosis of TS in cases where there are twins? Which is exactly what I was wondering. Okay, so the Tourette Association answers it this way. It says here, most of what we know about TS in twins comes from a few relatively small studies of TS and tic disorders carried out with siblings. These studies indicate that about 50 to 70% of identical twin pairs with the same genetic endowment will both have TS, and the other 30 to 50% of identical twin pairs, only one of the twins will express the disorder. Concordance rates, meaning cases where both twins have the same syndrome or symptom, are higher for tic disorders in general. In 70 to 95% of identical twin pairs, where one twin has some type of tic disorder, including TS, the other twin will also have a tic disorder. Also, we've learned that in families where both twins have TS or another chronic tic disorder, one twin's symptoms may be more severe than the other. It is thought that these differences in severity may be associated with a variety of environmental factors. For example, in one study, the identical twins who had more severe symptoms also had lower birth weights than their co-twins with milder symptoms. In other words, twin studies suggest that although TS is an inherited condition, there is a great deal of variability in the expression of TS, and this variability is likely due, at least in part, to environmental factors. As far as we know, the prognosis of TS, that is, the way the disorder develops, progresses, or improves over time, is no different in twins than in other people. All right, so I guess that's where the news anchor would say something like, there you have it. Learning all the time here and talking a lot too. Got to run and pack for that California trip. I'll be in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. This is Ben.